Hi, my name is Metin Teke, and you're watching Perspectives on Faith. This show aims to explore the expressions of the sacred in faith, in prayer, in ritual, and in theology. We hope to cover both the theological basis of faith as well as contemporary issues relating to faith in today's world. On this edition of Perspectives on Faith, we will talk about ethics and human responsibility in Islam. Our guest today is Dr. Jamal Elias. He's a professor of religious studies at the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Elias, welcome to our show.
Thank you very much.
In Islam, destiny is extremely important.
Absolutely.
We know that there's a hadith of the Prophet where the Archangel Gabriel comes and asks him to inform him about faith, to which one of the pillars is the belief in qadar, or destiny. Why is that so?
Well, basically, it all boils down to the central Islamic notion that God is omnipotent and omniscient. So in the sense that God knows everything, God can do everything, and God is eternal, which of course means that anything that human beings could ever do, would ever do, and not just human beings, but in fact anything in the universe, whatever will happen, has happened, God knows about it. Therefore, any events that human beings will act out in their own lifetime in the future has already occurred, is already predetermined in a sense by God. God knows what will happen. From God's perspective, it can't change. From God's perspective, God can't be surprised by what we'll do, in other words. From a human perspective, on the other hand, so that's what qadr basically is. It's God's divine omnipotence. From our perspective, it's the fact that things are predetermined. At the same time, however, it also means that from our perspective, we actually don't perceive it as having been predetermined. This is actually one of the biggest problems, because imagine if we lived in a world in which we sort of just all assumed whatever is going to happen, and I have absolutely no control over my destiny in any sense. It would be very difficult to get children to prepare for school. It would be very difficult for anyone to do hard work. So in fact, we all, from a human perspective, Muslims overwhelmingly believe that the choices we make at every moment are in fact free. So that in other words, if I, sitting here, was to decide to do something like push the table over or something like that, God knows I'm going to push the table over, but the choice at that moment was made by me. I basically choose to do it or I choose not to do it. And actually, in classical Islamic thought, this thing developed along the notions of something called the doctrine of acquisition, or the doctrine of what's called qasb in Arabic, in that human beings are believed to actually acquire their acts from God. So what God does is He, in every instant of time, an instant being the smallest particle of time, in every instant of time, God creates acts. So for example, sticking with this example of me turning a table over, God in this instant would create the ability for me to turn over the table, the ability for me not to turn over the table, and the discerning ability to judge which is the right thing and the wrong thing to do. So in a sense, what happens is, by this sort of a logic, God retains authorship of the actions. God is the one who acts. God's the one who makes the decisions. God is the one who at some greater level knows what's going to happen. He's the one who does all the acting. This is qadr. It's divine power. But at the same time, God has also created within me the genuine ability to make a real choice. And so by making a real choice, I then retain responsibility for the actions. And if you actually look at it that way in all these little instances of time, yes, from God's perspective, God knows the outcome and in fact determines the outcome of everything that happens in our lives. But at the same time, as we walk through that life in every instant, we're actually making very real choices in each moment, and we're making responsible choices in the sense that, sometimes they're irresponsible choices, but we're responsible for them.
So, from what I understand, God is determining our environment, the creation, but not our will.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in a sense, God is is determining the environment, but at the same time we are actors within it. So using, in fact, the word environment as an example, one of a very strong concept in Islam is that human beings are put on the earth, in fact, to manage it as custodians. This notion of Khalifa is a term that we, Caliph gets used in sort of as in English, largely in the sense of sort of the head of the Muslim community in pre-modern times. But actually, the notion of caliph is the notion of a representative or a custodian. And human beings are created as the custodians of God on earth. So when you think about the environment, we in fact are responsible for the world around us, and there's acknowledgement that we'll participate in it, that we'll actually do something in it, and our impact on it is very real and can have negative consequences as well as positive consequences. The Quran has a very important verse which it's actually the word Khalifa appears only twice in the Quran. On one occasion, it actually it's a reference to David, the prophet King David. But the other, just saying that, he is telling him that he is God's caliph on the earth. But the other one is very interesting, in which it says, the Quran says, indeed, I am creating a khalifa, a caliph on the earth. God says this to the angels. And the angels reply, are you going to create something that will cause chaos in it and shed blood? And God replies, indeed, I know what you do not know. And this, in fact, is a reference to the creation of human beings. Human beings are being created in the world as God's caliph, God's representative. And the angels don't understand, because, at first glance, this is a creature that causes chaos and sheds blood, and it looks like we do that a lot. But God has this, the whole point, indeed I know what you do not know, implies that, in fact, there's a greater purpose to all this, to the human beings being custodians, that they're capable of doing something better and greater than causing chaos and shedding blood.
Are we involved in realizing, actually, the ultimate purpose in creation?
I think that's actually a very big question, and one in which I think the answer is an emphatic yes. In an Islamic context, in many ways, in the Quran, in Hadith, in Islamic theology, in philosophy, there's a very, very strong notion that human beings are the culmination of creation. But they're the culmination of creation actually by being the first thing God thought of. So God's purpose, in a sense, was to see us in some sort of a perfect form. When God sort of conceived of human beings, He didn't conceive of human beings who would cause chaos and shed blood. What His intention was for us to realize our greatest potential, which is what we're all supposed to be moving towards collectively, because that's the thing, in fact, that He imagined in the very first place. So, in fact, in many ways, human history at an individual and a collective level should be viewed, from an Islamic religious perspective, as a movement towards this realization, as opposed to perhaps going back to some original era or something like that.